I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.
Hello and welcome to the Counter Narrative Show. Today we are exploring the lack of diversity in the cannabis industry. I am joined by two guests, Tyrone Russell and Denise Vidot. I should have asked you that ahead of time.
All good. At least you didn't say Vidiot. It's Vito.
It's Vito? Yeah, that's definitely a thing that I typically check. Okay, so I'm joined by Tyrone Russell and Denise Vito to help us to really kind of explore this topic. So to really just to get us started, I really want to share with everyone just a few statistics on some of the things that I have come to see really in terms of like my research with the cannabis industry. And then what I want to do is I want to hand it over to our guests to introduce themselves. And then after they introduce themselves, we're going to dive right into the content. So some of the things that I've gotten from looking at some of the cannabis industry statistics is that one of the things that came up for me is that 12% of Americans are active marijuana users, according to a Gallup poll from 2019. I feel like that number is probably significantly higher than 12%, honestly. Nationwide, cannabis sales increased 67% in 2020. I think that's telling us something. Support for legal marijuana is at an all-time high of 68%. The U.S. cannabis industry is worth $61 billion in the worldwide. Cannabis capital raises declined 67% in 2020, and senior level salaries increased. So that's also giving us a bit of information. So enough of that background information. I'm going to go straight over to Denise. And first, Denise, introduce yourself to us. Let us know your name. Give us a little bit about your background. What is your familiarity or interest in this topic of the cannabis industry?
Well, hello. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited. And this topic is extremely important, so I'm even more excited to be engaged in the discussion. But I am Dr. Denise Christina Vito. I am a cannabis epidemiologist at the University of Miami School of Nursing and Health Studies. And what that basically means is that I am a scientist. Epidemiologists are those scientists who collect data on multiple diseases. Usually when I think of it, when I'm trying to explain what it is that I do to people, I think of, especially now in the middle of COVID, you know, Dr. Fauci or those people in CDC who are counting all the cases. That's typically what I would be doing and people like me. So how am I involved in the industry? Well, I am a cannabis epidemiologist. So that means every study that I work on is trying to provide evidence on how cannabis influences human health. So I'm very excited. And one of the things that I am most passionate about is making sure that we are leveraging the voices of underrepresented populations that use cannabis to enhance their health in any way. So
I love it. I love that connection between looking for ways, looking to demonstrate and show for folks like the ways in which cannabis is a health resource, and that is actually something that is like codified into an actual profession. I think it's really interesting too now that Dr. Fauci can actually be a reference for something. So I'm probably going to ask you a little bit more about that, just the connection between an epidemiologist and something like cannabis. Like, I'm going to want to know more about what exactly an epidemiologist does, because I really thought it was just infectious diseases. Am I right about that?
That was the beginning. That was kind of like, you know, that's what the history of epidemiology really is. But since now you can really translate epidemiology to even community health research, prevention. So it's really an important topic, but I'm very biased, very biased.
We're all biased, if we're honest. You know what I mean? Thank you so much for sharing that. So Tyrone Russell, I want to go over to you. Same question. What is your background or connection to this particular topic? And what brought you to this particular topic?
Yeah, appreciate it. Like Denise said, thank you for hosting this conversation, and you know, more importantly, thanks for inviting us on here. Right, you could have invited a million other people. You chose us, so we definitely appreciate that. My name is Tyrone Russell. I am the president of the Cleveland School of Cannabis, which is the second state-approved institution for cannabis education in the country, and the first east of Colorado. And we're essentially a career school for the cannabis industry, right? We looked at the industry and we said, there's going to be something missing, right? Everybody's creating this brand new industry, but no one's talking about who the hell is going to work in the industry. And I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to say hell on the radio.
Oh, it's totally fine.
But we haven't had that conversation about who's going to strap up and get to work to get this industry moving, right? We're thinking on this level of who's going to be the bosses and who's who has the money to get in, but we haven't done a good job at building the workforce to enter into the industry, right? So I have a history in education. I went to school to get my master's in higher education and counseling, right? So the idea of developing post-secondary institutions is something that I studied in school. And I had a long history working, in community colleges and private schools, state schools. And then finally, when the cannabis industry came on this side of the world, I started to think, how could I contribute to this growing industry and make sure that folks have access to it? And education was the way from my perspective.
I love it. I love that there is such a thing that exists called Cleveland School of Cannabis, because I feel like cannabis actually opens up multitude of industries.
Absolutely.
Not just the folks who are growing it, but people who are investing in it, business enterprises, health professionals, people who are blogging and talking about this topic. Right. I'm really curious to learn more about what are some of the main jobs or professions that people are taking on in connection with this industry, with cannabis.
For sure. I mean, fresh out the gate, everyone that comes to the school and then leaves, most folks are going to what I call now, right, the traditional route. They're hitting horticulture facilities, processing facilities, dispensaries. That's the primary line of work. But then we have a bunch of other folks who come in and say, look, I already got skills, right? I've already been a salesman. I've already worked this. I've already worked that. I just need to add cannabis on top of it and then enter back into the field and occupy that space with the cannabis information, in my book bag. So we're seeing a wide range of people who are coming through the school and to enter the industry from where they've already grown and developed.
Nice. So a lot of people, because they've been in horticulture or have some background with like growing or even, I don't know, ecology, they probably have some of that. So the Cleveland School of Cannabis, how long has it been operational? And I'm asking that in connection with this recent rise of cannabis being something that is now accepted. Like, how long has it existed that people have taken it so seriously that they've decided to establish an entire school?
So we started it in 2017 when Ohio said, hey, we're going to open it up here because our founder, who had no history in education at all, he was in the cannabis industry back in California, lost a ton of employees. Folks, he's like, I'm a master grower. And they have a certificate that gave them 2 hours worth of, knowledge in growing cannabis. And they were coming in realizing what it was like to grow on a larger scale and couldn't do it. So he was like, man, I need to go back to where I'm from and start this school because people are going to need solid employees. So he brought us in to help get it off the ground. But it was really just looking at the industry and seeing that immediate need and saying, what can I do to get into the industry and witness it from his standpoint. So we're a career school. Our goal is to get people employed first and foremost, right? Our goal is to get you a job. It's not to just teach you, about cannabis. It's not just to bring people together who really love the plant and want to talk about it. We have a goal to say, once you finish here, we need to get you employed. So we, from start to finish, that's what we're working on when people walk in our doors.
Awesome. So Dr. Denise Fado, I'm really curious about some of the most common uses, particularly as it relates to health with cannabis. What are some of the most common ways in which people are able to use cannabis to heal themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really depends on what state they live in. So that's, a multi-layered question. So if you're talking about it from an access perspective, that's one thing. But then from medicinal perspective, there's data that shows that cannabis is helpful in many diseases. One of them, for example, is HIV. And I can speak to that from my personal research that we're conducting in our lab. So for example, HIV patients, they consume cannabis and we're finding evidence that their symptoms are being managed better, which increases their quality of life in the long term. Also, some studies that we've been running show that those who have access to cannabis, who are managing like their HIV, for example, also use less opioids. So we can always have a large discussion about that and, you know, the risk mitigation that we're working with when we have this evidence on cannabis. But as far as other health conditions, again, it's really by state of what's available as far as medicinal routes. But I'll stop there unless you'd like to go deeper.
I'm really curious more about, in connection with what you shared, how was epidemiologists connected to cannabis, and how was it presented, or how successful has it been in being presented as a viable solution and cure to some of the things that ailed us?
Yes. So epidemiology in itself, if you were to Google or research the word cannabis epidemiologist, I probably am one of the only ones that is there. So I don't know if I'm creating a term or am I trailblazing an industry? I'm not sure within the industry. But so that's kind of to answer that question of what, you know, if epidemiology is open into cannabis in that way. Typically, the research, usually with epidemiology, there's layers to it. So we're starting off with getting, you know, preliminary evidence, and then rigor increases to then eventually impact policy. The problem with cannabis research, and especially epidemiologic research, is that the federal government does not allow us to conduct research or let's put it this way, there are many barriers to conduct research in a rigorous way. And that's providing some challenges to getting that medical information and evidence needed for patients.
Could you speak more to those barriers? Like, are those barriers related to a lack of people taking it seriously, people just putting in their mind that, yo, people aren't sick, they're really just trying to get high? What are some of the barriers to people accepting this as a viable solution towards healing?
Yes. So actually I have data to back that up. We conducted a survey actually of some healthcare providers to see what the barriers were to communicating with their patients. And the number one, of course, was lack of evidence, lack of education. So just not understanding. In medical school, cannabis is not taught. The endocannabinoid system is not taught. If cannabis is spoken about for the majority, and this is based on the curriculums that I see, I sit on the admissions committee at University of Miami. So I've seen the curriculum. No one's really talking about the endocannabinoid system. So if you think about the down regulation impacts, it's really, you have physicians, healthcare providers that are unaware of the medical impacts due to a system that's already in our body. So that to me is number one. So I'm excited when I see schools like the School of Cannabis, you know, educating, because that's number one. We need that for industry.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you just definitely said a word that I'm not familiar with. Can you tell us what is how do you say endocannabinoids? What is that? What's its function? How does that show up?
I'm sorry for my big smile. It's my favorite topic to talk about. I am obsessed with the endocannabinoid system. So I actually enjoy kind of helping people pronounce, because I didn't know, and I actually embarrassed myself at a conference. I'm here all new. I was a student working on my cannabis research, and I pronounced it and was embarrassed. But the way I go is, so it's the endocannabinoid system. So usually if it's in a crowd, I have everybody doing it together. So I would love it if we can three together, if we could say it.
Endocannabinoid system.
Endocannabinoid system. Got it.
Yeah, for sure.
So this system is something that's already in our bodies. It is like, you know, when you were in school, you probably heard of the respiratory system, the skeletal system. We know about these things. Well, endocannabinoid system is one of those systems that all vertebrates have, including dogs. So I have a pit bull, she has an endocannabinoid system. And the reason why that's so important is because this is the reason why cannabis, phytocannabinoids, are able to help our bodies through the system that already exists in our body. And what I like to really tell people is that even if you've never consumed cannabis before in your life, you have cannabinoids in your body, and they're called endocannabinoids. So I can go for decades about talking about the endocannabinoid system. So I don't know if you want to stop me now, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, I have just one more question on that, and that is what is the function of it? What is the function of that system?
Yeah, so this system is responsible for keeping our body at balance. We call that homeostasis. So we want to keep things regulated at the right balance, and that's what homeostasis is, and that's what this system is responsible for. How are we not teaching physicians and
right?
Great question.
Yeah.
No, I mean, at minimum, that really, like, I have never heard of it. So I appreciate you sharing that and sharing that breakdown. It's obvious that there's so much more education that needs to happen. And some of that is happening gradually as the industry expands and more people, and it not just expands, but becoming more acceptable in mainstream. For example, CBD is a broad category and it's recently hit mainstream since becoming federally legal. But many of us still doesn't really know what those letters stand for, or exactly what they mean when we're referencing CBD. Tyrone, could you tell us what exactly is CBD? What do those letters stand for?
You're going to ask me that question on the president of an institution. I am not a cannabis student. I am not a cannabis student.
You're not a cannabis student?
No, but the thing is, even, I've been in a lot of our courses, and when I refer to CBD, I really talk about it as kind of that I was going to say material, but the cannabinoid, right? Or the cannabidiol, right? It's cannabidiol. And what CBD for me, in my perspective of it really what it does is really brings you to that homeostasis, that homeostatic, however you want to say that point in your body. So I always tell people when they say, what does CBD do? I say CBD clears your body up to do what your body is supposed to do. That's what I always tell them. So when I'm addressing CBD and they say, so if I take CBD with a vitamin, what is CBD going to do? I say, what the CBD is supposed to do is clear your body up so that vitamin can do what it's supposed to do. Right. So we could take vitamins and, people take vitamins and they don't treat their body the way it's supposed to. So they're like, I don't have a reaction when I take, that supplement. It doesn't do anything for me. What I always tell you is if you take that with some CBD, then CBD should clear up, some of those receptors that allow you to then access those vitamins. But I would always turn that over to people who actually study, the plant. Really, when we talk about CBD, we're talking about a major derivative from hemp, low THC plants. But I would love people who actually study it on a day-to-day basis to do that. My job is to get those folks in front of people. It's like when Henry Ford said, I don't have all the answers, but I know how to get the people who do have the answers in front of the people who don't. And that's my primary goal as a president of an institution, is to make sure I'm doing the research to find those people who get to tell people exactly what they're looking for. Like Henry Ford said, I didn't build a car. I'm not smart enough, but I was smart enough to say I don't know, but I know the people who can, and I was smart enough to get them in the same building and do it together.
Right. Makes total sense to me.
Absolutely.
Dr. Venice Vidal, would you be able to shed more light on that term, CBD? What exactly do those letters mean? What is the function of CBD?
Yes. And actually, I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Fantastic. All right. So I love to show these photos. So first, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is a visual representation that I always like to show when I'm talking about the endocannabinoid system, in particular when we're talking about CBD and cannabinoids and THC. So before we even talk about the cannabinoids, let's talk about the system. So as I was talking about, our body already has a system inside of it. Mm-hmm. This is showing us all of the organs in our body, right? So we have our brain, lungs, heart, etc. So you see CB1, CB2. Those are the two main receptors within the endocannabinoid system. There's other receptors too, but let's just focus on those two for now. Okay. So those two receptors, CB1 and CB2, they're found on different parts of our body. So here you can see, for example, the brain has both CB1 and CB2. This is extremely important, especially when we're talking about CBD and THC, because of this reason right here. The cannabinoids interact, I don't want to say react, but they combine, they adhere to receptors based on where they fit. So if you look here in this picture, THC can fit into CB1 receptors. So if you remember the picture of the body that I was showing you, anywhere you see the word CB1, that means if you consume THC, it has the opportunity to impact that organ. Mm-hmm. Now, if we look at CBD, however, CBD does not have that structure that binds perfectly to CB1 or CB2. However, there's lots of evidence that suggests that it interacts with other cannabinoids such as THC. So here is why, and it's kind of in between the two. So when you're talking about inflammation and things like that, that's when you're really looking at the CBD. So that's just a big picture. Any questions before I go into a little deeper?
I mean, I got so many, but I'm also curious to hear about what more you have. So it sounds like CBD has less like operates in less spaces than, for example, THC, because THC operates everywhere where CB1 can be?
Well, CBD operates in a different way than THC with different organs. And that's one of the reasons why medicinal properties are really enhanced with it. And it's it's really complex. So I'm giving a very basic overview right now. But the important thing to note is that it matters what type of cannabinoids and even more so terpenes, but we're not going to go there right now. But the reason why it matters is because of this system. This system here can, engage with certain cannabinoids, but it has to have the right one. So
can you tell me about THC and some of the differences, for example, between CBD and THC and how it impacts the body?
It really, again, it depends on number one, it depends on the patient too, the parts of the body, because all of our bodies, since we have an endocannabinoid system already, some of us may have a well-functioning endocannabinoid system without any phytocannabinoid supplementation. But some of us, particularly patients who have fibromyalgia, some evidence is suggesting patients with lupus, they already have a deficiency within this endocannabinoid system in their body. So depending on the deficiency, that's which cannabinoid you'll supplement it with. So I started with that because it's really hard to just say what's the difference between THC and CBD. We've kind of gone beyond that now. It's more of what is the difference between a cultivar that has THC, CBD ratios, et cetera, versus one that's maybe an isolate or one that's only CBD or only any cannabinoid.
Got it. Okay.
I'll stop my stream screens because I know we're not in class here, but I told you I get crunk about the endocannabinoids.
I am here for it. I am here for it. We've been joined by another panelist. I want to make sure that that we bring them up and give them a chance to share. Right now at the bottom where your name should be, it says Wayne It Farms. Just go ahead for a moment, if you don't mind, introducing yourself, your relationship to the topic, and what brought you to the cannabis industry.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all feeling today?
Good. What's going on?
Hey, Shaggy.
Hey, how you doing, Doc? I hear you was dropping some knowledge about the endocannabinoids.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Shaggy Brown. I have a brand, Shaggy Snacks. I've been in the cannabis industry for, like I say, about 20 years. I'm very much so into the medicinal side of things more than the recreational side of things. I've lost so many friends and family to different illnesses and different sicknesses and different things that I know could have been helped if they would have known more about cannabis and understand the benefits of it. So, my reason for even, tapping into this panel or whatever you want to call it, is that, I feel that there needs more knowledge to be put out. There needs more people who actually are, connected to lifestyle to be talking about a lot of this kind of stuff, or understanding this type of stuff, so they can tell it to their friends, or they can, we can spread the word to the right people, or to people maybe I don't know the right people might be, but I mean I think more people of urban and from I guess the hoods should have more knowledge about what these CB1 and CB2 receptors are, and understand more about the endocannabinoid systems, understand more about the health is wealth in general. That's the mindset I push, and that's the mindset I live for. Is health is wealth. Don't look at smoking weed, or don't look at just weed in general as just some way for you to just get away from reality. It's for you to be able to tap into understanding and understand how to be able to keep yourself healthy, keep yourself happy, keep yourself focused, keep yourself on point. Like I stress, health is wealth. So, I'm here just to learn more, to be honest with you. I'm here to learn more, to hear more insight. You got Doc, is it Denise?
Yes.
How was I say? Okay. Got Dr.
You're
Denise
pronouncing it
here.
right.
I always see her in different rooms, speaking the truth and the knowledge, and giving them as much information as she can give out to the right people that are listening and tapped in and wanting to hear these things, this information. So I want to actually keep pushing for the medicinal side of things, and if I can help give, I like my brother DMX always says, if I can change one person's life, then I've done my job. That one person might go out there and tell the next person, or tell the next person and the next person, or the knowledge that they was trying to get might help them or people around them. Give knowledge back to we got the youth, we got the future people that's coming up in this world in this day and time. So I think they don't have too many big homies or big brothers or OGs that's actually giving them the right information. So if I could be one of them kind of big brothers or them OGs, then that's what I'm striving for as I grow into my legacy in my life.
Love it. I noticed, Tyrone, as Shaggy was sharing a bit about the need for people to be educated in urban communities and that sort of thing, you were nodding quite a bit in agreement, which makes me curious about what are some of the things that you are finding that you are having to help folks learn or unlearn as it relates to understanding cannabis?
I think the first thing is dispelling the myths and tearing down the myths that scare a lot of our people away from the industry. The government has done a number on us when it comes to this plant, right? We've gone through the ringer trying to understand our place with this, right? So there's some fear in folks when it comes to them bringing their history to light and saying, yeah, I've been in the industry, because we're not quite sure yet. We've seen, in our history, folks kind of set us up for failure in many spaces. So I think one thing that we have to do, the first thing that we have to do is start to let people know that this is a real industry and there's room for us at the table. And that's one of the things that we continue to do, even in our partnerships, start reaching out to communities that have been broken, right? And have been targeted and locked up and thrown away over this plant, and then bringing them out and saying, we can't lose out on weed twice, right? We can't lose out on marijuana twice. We can't lose out on cannabis, whatever y'all want to call it. We can't lose out on it twice. So educating them about just the existence of the industry in general. And then the other thing is understanding where education fits in the lives of a lot of folks, right? Because some folks have been miseducated about cannabis. So I could have been in the industry for 30 years, but then when it gets turned over into the legal space, they're just concepts about entering into the space and in that market that I'm not fully aware of. So making sure people unlearn some of the bad habits they may have developed in terms of getting them to enter the space. The other thing that we're trying to do is, without making too many enemies, is understand how historically institutions have left us out of those doors as well. So if I'm talking about, if I allow these large institutions to undercut cannabis and undercut what we're trying to create, so start telling students that we offer the best education. So come here for 4 years, give us that money and we'll get you in the industry. Then I failed our community, horribly. Because when you really start to think about it, these schools are only graduating Black and brown folks at the best, when you think national, 48%. Now there's schools that are doing better, right? Like you look at Harvard, they have like a 94% graduation rate for Black folks. But overall, the national scale is a 42, 44% graduation for Black and brown folks on a national scale of 4-year institutions. If you look at community colleges, it might be a bit worse. The community college I worked at was graduating Black men at 10%. So if I allow those schools to grab hold of cannabis and then tell my people they have to go through their admissions process to access this market again, we've already lost. So part of our creation of the school is to let people know you don't have to go through that to enter into this industry, but you do have to go through some portions of education to get into the market. So when you ask me what does our community have to learn in order to get into the industry, it's just that it's real. And there are some non-traditional ways of accessing that industry that can get you through those doors from the ground level, and you can begin to work your way up in the budding industry, right? The other thing is everybody thinks they could just open a dispensary tomorrow, Like, hey, I'm going to open a dispensary. Yo, they got the market. I got 15,000. I'm gonna open up this dispensary, and I'm like, yo, slow down, right? We're not there yet. It's not that easy. And there's some work that has to be done on our advocate sides and our allies and our accomplices side to break that barrier. But until then, 15,000 ain't gonna get you in the game the way you thought it was before. So I think educating them on the realities of what this industry looks like is something that we got to continue to do.
You brought up, I feel like, a lot of good points, Tyrone.
That's
Tyrone,
true.
in terms of, oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something, Shaggy?
No, I was just agreeing with him. It's true. We need to get more knowledge, because I've been telling people about what it costs to get in this industry for years. And I tell them it costs about 200, 300,000 just to get started.
Right.
And they're like, man, what can I do for 15,000? What can I do for 20,000? Man, I got 50,000. I said, bro, get your money up. You got to get more money up. And I don't want to. I'm not trying to push people away from it. I just want to get them the knowledge so they understand the truth and the realism behind it, and understand that it's not just I open up a corner store or I just open up a food truck and just start doing business. It's a lot of knowledge that goes into it. It's a lot of relationships that go into it, and it's a lot of insight. Like, if people don't really understand the true value of the cannabis industry as a community, so if you're not working to build as a community, you're not really trying to get into this. You're just trying to make a couple bucks and stick to selling weed out the back door like you've been doing, and don't try to get in this industry and fuck it up for the people who's trying to do it the right way. That's how I look at it, you know.
And then pass the alley-oop over me to medical side. Then once you have people like that getting into the industry without the proper intentions, then you get patients who are having negative health impacts, and then they're blaming it on cannabis, not realizing that probably the people who were growing the cannabis may not have known how to do it properly, and not getting cannabis properly. So it's just a cycle that is just a systematic cycle. And Tyrone, hearing you talk, like I wrote in our chat here that it makes me want to go enroll, but just to support, because it's true. Like, like I can't even, my own family, it's hard to communicate with them about cannabis, and I do this for a living. So.
Right. And I just add to that, right? It's not just folks that look like us who really don't know what they're doing, or who don't have the liquid assets to get in the game that can destroy it. It's also, rich white folks who are getting in the game and just throwing money around, and they don't even have respect for the plant the way some of our folks who don't have, the bread to get into it do. They don't care about it. They're looking to make a quick buck, and they can destroy the industry just as quickly as our folks who may show up and say, y'all got 15 grand. What can I do? I want to make a quick dollar, because that person that got 13 million and wants to make a quick buck can be just as detrimental to the growth of the industry as that person could. And I would argue that they would probably be more detrimental to the game, because they have immediate access right now and the ability to destroy it, and have patients running around here, upset. We have folks right now mixing up CBD, since CBD is federally legal, mixing up CBD that can get you higher than any THC that you can put in your body, right? And they have access and money to do that. So now we're going to be arguing about certain aspects of CBD that are getting people high, because they're learning how to mix that up. You understand what I'm saying? We're not doing that. They are.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's so many good points that were brought up. I really like Shaggy, you introducing the amount of money that it takes to get into the industry. And then also your point that you brought up, Tyrone, in terms of like, there's two sides to the coin, wherein there's folks who have the money and they're just throwing out around the money, don't really respect the plant, haven't even been in connection with the plant prior to knowing that this is a business venture, and all of these ways that could complicate and muddy the waters. I want us to talk for a second about the barriers to entry in connection with 200 grand. I feel like there are people, Tyrone, that are familiar with this plant and have been working with it for a while and growing it, who even have background in horticultural, who have a horticultural background, who just grow shit, you know what I mean? Yeah. That don't have 200 grand. What, like, where do those folks go, or are there angel investors? Like, how can people get connected with such a high barrier to entry when previously this has been in addition to the health benefits and the recreational and the medicinal benefits, there was also an economic benefit to people who were in this industry that it's starting to like carve them out. So I think they're starting to feel that, and not only feel that they're being carved out, but also recognize and see that something that they were penalized for previously is now being praised, accepted. And because Brett has the 200 grand to make it happen, Brett can not only not go to jail, but Brett can make tons of money off of it. I feel like in having that conversation, we have to really speak to that part of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any takers?
No, I mean, I think you're talking my language, right? This is why I'm involved in the cannabis, the cannabis space, because I know the majority of my people aren't in licensing yet. They're on the ground floor trying to enter into the space because we don't have years and years of wealth building to where on that license, on that application, we can say, hey, I got 10 mil in the bank, right? You can check my bank statements right now. So, I'm never going to crash the industry because I don't have the money to continue to run my business. So part of even, that setup of it being so expensive, I understand particular aspects of it, right? It's because if I come in here with the last of my dollars to open up a dispensary, and the first year I don't get those customers and clients, then I have to close my doors. So they're trying to see if you can sustain not getting any funds in your door for a certain amount of time. So I kind of understand some aspects of that. But then you have folks layering over social equity projects and saying, hey, if you have, X percentage, or if you have a person of color on your license, you're more likely to get it. So then you have folks looking for people of color to be like, yo, I'll give you 1%, or let's put it in your name and you sell it to me immediately. So there are people being sued, in states for pushing the idea of social equity and or taking advantage of some of those loopholes and just putting people of color in front of the license so that they can fund it. And then once the license is accessed, saying, hey, we're the real owners of this. You don't own enough. All the way to like New York trying to implement a plan saying, if you do have a person of color on your license, they have to own 70% of that company, which offers its own set of issues. Because if I own 70%, that means people are going to expect me to put up 70% of the bread.
Right.
Which I can't. So imagine what type of things I'm writing on the back end and say, hey, I'll pretend like I own 70%. You give me the money and then I'll hook you up on the back end. So the idea of social equity is something that people are playing around with because they understand that Brett, might have 2 mil who can just come in the game, but then Tyrone doesn't. And they want, more Tyrones involved. But the money that folks throw around to prevent that stuff is huge. Like they'll sue the state. And the state will backtrack quick because they don't want to get sued for something that they're, trying to create in the social equity space rather than standing their ground in. So there's a lot going on in the industry.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear from, my man Shaggy, who's growing and doing that work, and even Doc, who is at a major institution, right? And how places like that are trying to make, education more accessible for people who want to get in the industry too, because I think it's critical that we're hitting from all angles.
Mm-hmm. I think that there are people, and I think some of the work that you're talking about that people are doing, Tyrone, is to kind of combat this history from this like war on drugs. Before I have a question for you, Shaggy, but before I go into that, I want to read this a snippet, and this is so it's according to this research article written by Dwayne Stanton and like 4 or 5 other folks called The Effects of Marijuana Legalization on Jail Populations, and it's specifically focused on Washington State. It says in 2012, Washington State legalized the production, sale, and possession of marijuana through Initiative 502. Advocates of legalization argue that it would decrease the jail population and reduce the disproportionate incarceration of minorities, reasoning that the police would refocus their resources on other matters. In order to evaluate this assumption, these researchers examined the jail bookings data, used set of uninterrupted time series regression models. Their findings indicated that jail population trends differ among counties across time with respect to impacts on minorities and women. With regard to ethnic and racial disproportionate impact, there appears to be little positive change. Shaggy, do you have any background on the legalization or decriminalization. Let's start there first. Could you share with folks, what is the difference between the legalization of marijuana and the decriminalization of marijuana? What is the
You
difference?
talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Okay, my bad. I'm just jumping back and forth to watching this funeral and tapping in with you guys at the same time. That's all.
I saw some clips of the DMX funeral. Some people that I know that are in New York right now posted some video.
Yeah, now they're doing it live. They're doing it live right now on YouTube. But what was you saying?
I was asking if you could share with us what is the difference between legalization of marijuana and decriminalization of marijuana?
In my eyes, decriminalization is more. See, decriminalization is more for the recreational side of things, and the legalization is more for the medicinal side of things. Because this is what I think about it. Because decriminalization, you're thinking about decriminalization, so you don't have to worry about nobody messing with you. You can smoke whenever you want to smoke, and you can just kick it and hang out, and you can just, nobody's messing with you for smoking and all that kind of shit. Legalization, mind you, this is where we can get more medical research. This is where we can get more, insights to understanding, what strains work best for people and stuff like that. What terpenes work best for people and stuff like that. So when I think about those two different things, they kind of mean the same, but they're completely different. And when I say they kind of mean the same, you want to get the decriminalization out the way, so we don't have to be living in fear or living in stress while we're enjoying our medicating. But we also want to take it a step further to get the legalization all the way out the way, so we can actually find out how to heal each other and keep us focused and doing shit right. Vice versa, taking pills or taking big pharma pharmaceuticals and all this type of stuff. We don't need no pills, none of that big pharma shit to live our life and to heal ourselves. We can do all that stuff naturally. And I'm very, very strong believer that cannabis is a great start to that. If people, older, let's say our older people, let's say people like 60, 70, 80 years old, sometimes they may not have a good appetite, or sometimes they may not want to feel like moving around and doing things. Sometimes they may not feel like it's certain things that cannabis helps for certain people. It doesn't affect everybody the same way. And this is what I'm starting to really hear more people talk about lately. It's more so, finding out the type of cannabis that works with your medicinal ailments. Not just, even a lot of these people who just smoke weed and just watch video games or play video games, watch basketball, watch TV. They don't know it themselves, that they're healing themselves. They may have mental trauma and mental pain and PTSD, and they're like, man, if I just go play some video games, smoke my weed, then I'll be cool. Yes, that's called medicating. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them don't really understand that. They just think that they're smoking weed and they're good. But if you actually pay attention to what you're doing, you're actually healing yourself. And like the gentleman was saying earlier, Tyrone, it's about the unlearn and relearn. And the one strong and really valuable way to do that is plant medicine. I 100% stand by it on all forms. Plant medicine, from cannabis to mushrooms to ayahuasca to combo to toad. It's all kind of different plant medicines that help people out, that can give you good feeling, good understanding of what's going on with our bodies. So I think plant medicine is the future, and I think everybody should use cannabis on a regular. And I'm not saying just once a day. Once, twice a day. Just like you would go drink water, just like you would go eat eat you a salad, eat you something. Like at the end of the day, all that stuff is giving you your healthy regimens, but cannabis is something that helps you with your receptors. Cannabis is something that helps you with things that you can't see on the outside, that you don't know that's wrong with you until you go see the doctor. So, I really believe that more than it get towards legalization, we'll be able to heal more people. But if I'm just speaking honest and straight up, I don't think they want to heal us. I think they want to keep us, at bay, because if you got more people that don't understand this, they're not gonna go out there and try to heal themselves. They're just gonna keep on just going drinking and eating fucking fatty foods and and smoking a blunt. Like, yeah, you smoking a blunt, but you're still also putting meat in your body. You're putting dairy in your body. You're drinking fucking beers and drinking champagne and all this type of shit. I'll be honest with you, I had to cut off a lot of people in my life because I felt like they wasn't going nowhere. They had no future, and they wasn't trying to get their self together. They were just, they thought, oh, I'm getting money. Yeah, I'm gonna go get some steak and lobster and get me a big bottle of 1942. And I'm like, dude, you're killing yourself. But I can only say so much because, a person that feels like he's getting money and he's eating his big steak and, he's got his big old bottle of fucking 1942, he think he's doing right.
Right.
And that goes back to the unlearn and relearn. If you go back to the fact that the unlearn and relearn, yeah, we thought that was doing right. If you watch that movie Game Changers, they put it out there that said eating meat was supposed to be the thing to make everybody strong and healthy. When they said they something in that movie, it was a lie. It was a lie just for the meat industry. It was a lie just for the milk industry. Like, it was all a lie. It's like, what are we gonna use these cows for? Yeah, milk and beef and all this stuff. So we got to get people to eat this shit on a regular and drink this shit on a regular. So that's why I 100% believe that in order to heal and unlearn and relearn, you need cannabis, because it's gonna make you sit and think like, damn, what am I doing with myself? Damn, what am I, like, this is not right. I'm not doing something right. It took me like 10, 15 years to really start waking up and understanding the true nuances of what's really being pushed down our throats and really being pushed in our heads of not to heal us, but to get rid of us. And I believe that having conversations like this and having conversations with more people like this, I talk to my hustling homies. I try to tell them, man, you ain't doing, you get money, I get it, but you're not doing a service to your body, bro. You put on the Gucci, you put on the Louis, you put on the fly outfits, the big chains, but your insides is shit. Most of these dudes got diabetes. Most of these dudes got fucking intestine problems and colon problems that they don't even know nothing about until they go to the doctor, and the doctor say, oh yeah, you 6 months from living.
So I feel like some of the things that I'm hearing, and I'm curious about how huge is your house, because I feel like you've been walking this whole time.
Madness, I can't.
No, I'm walking back and forth.
Okay. I was like, is his space a mansion? He's gonna have a destination at some point. But no, it sounds like what you're saying is echoing what other folks are saying in terms of like the importance of the education of the piece and the use of it in terms of like the healing qualities and just having better information. With that, I want to go over to Dr. Vido, and I really want you, I don't know if you have one of those fancy charts again, but I'm a fan of fancy charts, to talk about the differences of indica and sativa and how those strains are used. Is there one that's more popular for medicinal use and one more popular and used for recreational, if you have that insight? But if you could give me any background on the healing qualities or health related qualities of those two.
Yeah, actually, I'm actually happy you asked that question, because in the science, especially in the industry, we're kind of moving away from the indica does this, sativa does that. So that question is pretty loaded, and I think I may need to yield it, because the evidence, there is none because of that reason. It's no longer just indica, just sativa. So I think I'll yield to Tyrone, actually.
No, you're right. I think historically folks were
Tyrone is like, don't yield to me.
Nah, I think that was it. Historically, folks would say, you know, sativa, you know, gets you up, it gives you energy. Where indica, it also can be said for indica. So you get this body high and you lean back when you're on that indica. But to Doc's point, there are so many there's so many cultivars out there and so much breeding and mixing that a lot of that has lost its pizzazz. You think about something that's been illegal for so long, we haven't had the opportunity to do the just research that we need to do. So a lot of this stuff that people are talking about, you know, it's just old folklore from a long time ago, or it existed before, but now it's kind of like, yeah, that's not true anymore. That may have been true when they first, you know, started allowing us to research it, but now we've done enough to realize that we're so far, you know, beyond that. So Doc is right. We've been trying to throw that out, even though we present it in some of our horticulture slides. We just let people know that was some of the classifications that folks would have out there before.
I have found that at a lot of the dispensaries, at least the one in Maryland where I live, everything they offer is a hybrid. Anyway.
It's safer to say that.
Yeah.
That actually adds more layers to challenges for research and understanding the impact on patients, because just when we thought we had it under control and we had an idea, then we have all these hybrids coming. So it's a little harder for us from a clinical standpoint to be able to help the patients when, and not only that, for example, I always like to use the example of wedding cake, because that's one of the profiles that I really like, just like the clinical properties. But a wedding cake that you purchase in Amsterdam is not the same. It may not be the same wedding cake that you purchase in Miami versus Colorado versus Cali. So even like following names is not really best standard anymore.
It's true. I remember my favorite used to be Luke Skywalker, right? I was like, oh, I love Luke Skywalker. But then I had Luke Skywalker again, and I'm like, but that Luke Skywalker didn't do what the first Luke Skywalker did. Like, what's up with that? I know if I was drinking vodka's always going to have that impact on me if I'm buying the same vodka, right? But for some reason, that Luke Skywalker that I bought from a dispensary in San Diego, you know, the one that I bought from a dispensary in Michigan just didn't have the same impact. And I was like, what is with that, right? So I couldn't even stick to that type of cultivar because it didn't do the same thing that I was looking for, you know, from the first point. So
how has the evolution of the use of edibles impacted the industry? Has that increased it significantly? Dr. Vido, are you finding that people who may be adverse to smoking are more willing to ingest cannabis differently? Like, what are some of the impacts of the explosion of cannabis? Of edibles to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And from a patient perspective, that's actually opened up the doors for some of the medicinal patients. So as Shaq was talking about earlier, with like the older women or like the older, you know, population who may want something for pain management, but can't imagine themselves unlearning what they've been trained about the stigma of cannabis. So the smoking may not be, you know, an option for them. But an ointment, maybe. I know that's not an edible, but to me, when I'm thinking of it from a scientific perspective, it's like, you know, smoking, edibles, tinctures, you know. And I also think that from an industry perspective, that also gives opportunity for those who may not want to touch the plant in particular, and maybe be more like on the baked goods. So you're seeing like a lot of infused foods. So although that helps the industry, that also adds opportunities for misuse in the terms of infusion, like just doing it improperly, perhaps adding health, you know, impacts in the wrong type of way. But to answer your question shortly, it's definitely opened up the opportunity for us to provide options for patients, one, and then also it's also opened up the opportunity for us to do more research, because now we can see that, oh, well, for IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, perhaps it's good for them to take a pill or something and go straight to the gut versus something that bypasses the gut. You know, there's just, or vice versa, I should say. Speaking of, if you really want me to show you pictures, I can show another picture from a COVID study that's pretty relevant about changing routes. It's up to you. What time?
Yeah, if it's particularly if it's connected to this.
Yeah.
If not, I want to go to. There we go.
Let me show you because I'm gonna own it. Don't you gave me the opening.
Listen, I'm
Your
here
screen,
for
you see
it.
all my screens.
There you go.
Listen, I'm an academic, so I love a good chart in a presentation.
Yes. So the reason why I want to show this to you all is because this is a preliminary study that I've done with some collaborators. So the COVID cannabis study that we're working on, but right here, we looked at some medicinal cancer patients. And what's great here is that you can, or let me not say great, I'm getting too excited. I'm a scientist. It's very interesting to note from this chart here that you see is that before the pandemic was declared, the majority of the patients that reported cannabis use were using it in a smoking format. Once after the pandemic was declared, you can see by these numbers here that smoking was no longer. Now you'll see the orange, which is the new, and that's edible. So that's exactly to your question, you know, with the increase of edible. So you'll see that they're reducing the smoking, increasing edible. You also see picture here. So what we get from that is that the patients are listening to health, you know, cautions about the COVID pandemic and respiratory issues.
Absolutely. That's it. That's a great chart. That's regarding cancer patients, right?
Yes.
If you look at the entire market, right? So cannabis from 2019 to 2020, you look at what the pandemic did. It grew 54%. So while everything was shaking, cannabis market grew 54%, right? Edibles grew 60%, which outpaced the entire market because folks are like, hey, I can take an edible. Nobody has to know I'm taking it, right? Folks don't want to tell people that they're using cannabis all the time. They can take it in their home. They can take it around their kids and not have an impact. They can take them like medicine. There's taste, right? And then in many cases, when people smoke, you really don't have the ability to control how much you're inhaling, if that makes sense, right? You inhale and you just wish for the best, right? You take a little bit, but when you take an edible, you're like, you know what? I'll take this piece and I'll sit on this for a while, right? And then I'll take another piece and I'll sit on that for a while. So you're able to kind of microdose a lot better than if you were just taking flower, or if you were vaping, which is probably going to see continue to see a decline because of all the other options that people have for engaging with cannabis. So beyond the cancer, folks with cancer, like edibles are on the rise across the country in general and outpacing everyone else. That's all I buy.
Say that again.
That's all I buy. If I because I don't partake often, but if I do, I'm saying I'm going to grab an edible for myself, right?
Yeah. I have like smoke issue. Like I just have issues with smoke in my lungs, so it automatically dictates how I ingest. So it's so interesting, Tyrone, that you said that in terms of smoking. I hope for the best, and maybe it's because some of us have multiple resources in terms of whether we get from a dispensary or we get from the homie. And one of the things that I have found that is helpful with the dispensary is that they are consistent about dosage.
Yeah.
The homie is not consistent about dosage. And that is a situation wherein that could be a challenge. What has it looks like Shaggy is frozen. I wanted to go to him to ask him a bit about some of the experiences that he's familiar with. But before we go to that, I'm going to, I just want to share a few stats. How is it nighttime where you are? Okay, his house is huge. Let's just say that he has an elevator in it.
A gym.
He walked for an hour and never stopped.
I'm visiting.
Party at Shaggy's.
I'm visiting. That's it. It's over.
That's it.
Can we just all agree to go to Shaggy's for the party?
That's it.
Yeah, that's the turn up spot. So I'm going to go to some information that I found. And it's really around that legalization and decriminalization. And it's the ACLU reported in 2010, reported that in 2010, Black people were 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than white people, even though both groups consume marijuana at the same rate. 9 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized the recreational use of cannabis, and 29 states allow some of the medical marijuana. San Francisco recently dropped thousands of marijuana-related convictions. Seattle plans to do the same, but it doesn't change the federal restrictions. How do you imagine the industry, this more acceptance of it, generally to impact that? So we talked a bit about like how it's impacting entry to the industry, $200,000 to enter. A lot of people don't have that level of loot. Talked a little bit about some of the other barriers in terms of education to entering the industry. I'm really curious about the ways in which it could potentially impact legalization, decriminalization, also folks who are using, we're seeing some of the stigma, it's being destigmatized and more accepted. How do you imagine that might impact the justice system?
Clearly, when you decrim something, right? When they decrim it, they're essentially saying, for me, I always say that still doesn't make it legal, but what it says is, look, you'll get a fine for smoking. You're not going to go to jail for it anymore. So they'll find a way to get their money even on the decrim market, where when it becomes legal, then we don't get in trouble for it at all unless we're doing something illegal with it. You know, think about alcohol. It's not illegal to drink alcohol, but it is illegal to drink alcohol, then get behind your car, right? So the decrim idea is just like, hey, right now we'll give you a fine. You won't get a fine for drinking alcohol unless you're drinking it somewhere that says you'll get a fine for drinking it here, right? So when you start thinking about legality versus decrim, it's really about what happens to you if you're caught with it, right? Decrim, you'll get a fine, right? You're not going to jail. It's a slap on the wrist. When it's talking about legal, you're not even getting that fine or slap on the wrist, right? You're good to go unless you're doing something you're not supposed to with it. But I think essentially, drug convictions really hold the fort for the prison system. Drug conviction, and the majority of those being marijuana convictions. So they hold the fort for it. It's easy to grab somebody, throw them in jail, and now we're getting that money for them, right? So when that happens, the criminal justice system is going to have to find another way to sustain itself. And I have no doubt that they will, right? That's what scares me, is that I have no doubt that the criminal justice system is going to find a way to recreate itself and still exist in the United States of America, because they're not going to be able to do it on the backs of cannabis. So they'll find other ways to get Black and brown folks back behind bars, and I just don't know what that is yet, right? In the 80s, it was the war on drugs. We got you, right? So they're going to find a way in 2025 to say, how do we get these folks back in here? We'll figure it out in a second, because we can't watch that implode, because it's like the top 2 or 3 employers or maybe the top 1 next to education is our justice system in terms of employers. So when that begins to falter, imagine the folks who don't have work. So imagine how many people are still rooting for us locking folks up, because they understand that when that's going, our jobs are at stake. So I think it's going to have an impact on how we begin to pass legislation surrounding other issues in our country, which can impact us just as well. That's my perspective.
Anyone else want to add to that?
In addition to all that he said, I agree. I agree. I just want to bring it from a clinical perspective as well. When I was a student, I actually studied at Morehouse School of Medicine, working with some incarcerated youth, collaborating with studies that they were doing there. And that's actually one of the first places I saw marijuana. I'm going to say marijuana because back then that's what I used to call it back 10 years ago. So now we're 10 years ago. And my first interaction with cannabis research was with incarcerated youth. And just hearing, Tyrone, what you were talking, this is the reality. And then, what's going to happen also. So some of the things that we were studying is the mental health outcomes of being incarcerated, or, so if you're thinking about these people who are locked up for cannabis or marijuana, what are the mental health implications, especially seeing that now it's like cute if you're consuming cannabis. So imagine if you're locked up looking on TV right now and people are literally becoming millionaires off of something that you literally had a little bag and you may be in jail for. So I am personally thinking of how my collaborators can help impact that by providing the evidence that this is a problem, so that we can give resources to improve the mental health. This is a cycle of struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Tyrone's point, there are people who are benefiting from this cycle that are not going to take too kindly to cannabis being decriminalized, because it's going to impact them. So I have something that I want to share about the impact of racism on the cannabis industry, and then I have a follow-up question to that. I will tell you that I'm reading an article that was published in Business Insider. The title of the article is How Racism Contributed to Marijuana Prohibition in the US. It has a full video of it. If folks want to use look at the video, it was published this year, March 31st, 2021. I don't easily see the author of this particular article. But anyway, they're talking about the history of marijuana and decriminalization. And it starts by letting us know that as early as the 1800s, there were no federal restrictions on the sale or possession of cannabis in the U.S. Hemp fiber from the plant was used to make clothes, paper, rope. Sometimes it was used medically, but as a recreational drug, it wasn't that widespread. In fact, a New York Times article from 1876. First of all, I didn't know New York Times was around for that long. New York Times article from 1876 cites the positive use of cannabis to cure a patient's dropsy. Basically, the swelling from accumulation of fluid is dropsy. In the early 1900s, an influx of Mexican immigrants came to the US fleeing political unrest in their home country. With them, they brought the practice of smoking cannabis recreationally, and it took off. The Spanish word for the plant started to be used more often, which was marijuana. Of course, because we're American, we took the word and kind of bastardized it. And because we don't like the fact that J's aren't pronounced, we put an H in it, apparently. This was then more sensational headlines about the drug began to appear. It also talks about in 1936, a propaganda film called Reefer Madness was released. In the movie, teenagers smoke weed for the first time. It leads to a whole bunch of bad stuff, rape, murder, and it was portrayed as a gateway drug. I've seen several people ingest weed. It never makes you want to, I've never seen them want to do anything remotely close to anything that I saw in that video, like not even, I mean, alcohol would bring people closer to some of the things that I saw mentioned. So with all of that, I want to ask the question of what do you feel has contributed to the shift in acceptance of marijuana? Like, how did it go from being a gateway drug to being considered acceptable? Anybody could handle that one.
That's dope. I think that's a dope question. I mean, you bringing up, the history of it, dating it back to, Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst, who wrote articles about why, in his yellow journalism, like writing articles about why weed is the devil's grass or whatever, right? But I think what made it more acceptable, to be honest, I'm gonna tell you one thing that I think we can't overlook is the globalization of hip hop music, right? When you ask about how come it's more acceptable now, I would say that the globalization of hip hop music and how hip hop music had taken down the barriers of talking about, cannabis as this thing that you should be afraid of, right? In the way that MCs introduced it to the market and the way folks started to accept it as something that was okay. You look from Snoop to Bone Thugs and Harmony, right, so on and so forth, and them kind of telling the world that this is okay and I'm still an okay person, right? Snoop came out and made smoking weed so cool, and yet he's still in the limelight of the world and people love Snoop, right? So I think that the upbringing of hip hop and our familiar understanding of that music and what they were talking about, I think made it more acceptable in the mainstream for people to begin saying, you know what, maybe this is something that we can commit to. I also think that folks started seeing the dollar signs in it. Like you watch the market move and you're like, we're arresting a lot of people for weed, for marijuana, for cannabis. We're arresting a lot of people, right? So the government is like, if we're arresting all these people for this, and deep down we know it's not as big of an issue as we think, then maybe some of these states that are having larger prison populations need to enter into the market about establishing our presence there. And if I was into I don't want to call it propaganda, but if I was into conspiracy theories, I would say that the government was involved from the beginning, and now they found their way to enter into the market on a legal the legal scale. It met the end of its bell curve where we arrested all we can for cannabis. Now it's back down. Now we get to get in from the other part and earn our keep for it. So I think there's so many reasons, but I would say one of the number one reasons is the normalization of hip hop in people's households, reaching into the suburbs, and how we talked about cannabis usage in that music, to the point to where folks started paying a little more attention to it. But that's just my perspective. 1 minute.
Right. No, I appreciate it. Dr. Vado, what would you say?
I would say that to be 100% honest, I wasn't expecting you to be quoting that the history of cannabis. So I have a little bit of like PTSD, because that makes me very angry as a Latina woman, you know. And I'm not going to share my screen. I'm going to take my hand off the mouse, but I have PowerPoint.
I have a slide.
That I have slides for this, because I talk about this. This is why I'm here. You understand? Like, this is why I'm here. And it's, I think much of course of what Tyrone was saying, but I also think it's because it's almost to the point where education, although we say education is needed, at the same time, education is increasing about this plant from a medicinal perspective. So it's getting a little harder for us, or not us, but for whoever is blocking the legalization or whatever to do that. Because now the evidence is, you can Google it. You know, the world is shrinking as far as information is concerned. So where we could have gotten away with avoiding the facts about cannabis or the evidence regarding cannabis, now it's a lot harder to hide from evidence. Because in America, they may do something, but you may find it from Israel. For example, a lot of the research that I look at is coming out of Israel, and it's actually informing some of the work that we can do here in the States and in Jamaica. Some of my research there is in Jamaica too.
That's a good point.
I think it's so interesting the ways in which a thing can be stigmatized so easily by attaching it to a race of people. It's like Black people and Mexican use this, so it's probably bad.
Right? I mean, it's on the same drug scheduling as heroin.
Yeah.
Like we really?
Right.
It's that easy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like the thing that makes it even more crazy for me is because I have seen what alcohol does.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I have seen a complete transformation in personality of people from the use of alcohol. So it's really interesting. I've got you guys way over your time. I'm gonna try to, oh man. Okay. One more question, and then I'm going to switch to the wrap-up questions. And this is, I'm going to go to Shaggy, because Shaggy looks like he looking at us now. So my question is it important to have diversity in the cannabis industry? If so, why or why not? And you have to unmute before you walk on.
Yeah. No, I was listening to the funeral. Diversity. That's a good one. The way I think about it, diversity. I'll be honest with you. I don't really think it should be. When you say diversity, explain that question from your perspective of what you feel diversity is.
Yeah. So primarily, I'm saying, do you think that there should be a proportionate amount of Black and brown people at different levels of the cannabis industry, ownership, owning dispensaries, making it, writing about it, those sort of things?
Okay. When you say that now, I think about it from that perspective. I look at it from that perspective. I don't think it should be divided. I think everybody should have a chance to be able to make money in the cannabis industry, because that's how it's been. It's been that way. Everybody's been making value in the cannabis industry for the last 40, 50 years, even 60 years, that it's been the popularity's been in. There's been white folks making money off of it. There's been Asians making money. There's been Jews. There's been Armenians. There's been Mexicans. Like when I really think of the depths of it, it's not to be singled out to be urban or suburban or white or Black or Mexican. I think it's something that's for everybody. I think this plant this plant, the value of this plant and how valuable it is to so many different people. Just imagine you think about it, might be an Indian person from India who's really good at understanding the biochemistry of cannabis. But once they understood the biochemistry of it, then they start smoking, and then they're like, man, it's never been bad. It was just been outlawed by the wrong people. So I don't really think it should be broken down to where blacks, browns, blacks, browns, Asians, I don't think it should be no color lines when it comes to cannabis. Just be honest with you. I think it should be, if you got to understand the plant. You got to learn the plant. I don't care what race you are, what creed you are, what religion you are. You understand the plant and understand the value of the plant and how the plant can help you and us and everybody else. Black, white, Asian. I mean, we all get sick. It's not a. When a person gets sick, it's not a color. It's not a race. It's not a religion. They're sick. They're human. They get sick. So I feel if we're gonna like work together, it should be about the plant, not about who I'm working with, because it can help all genres. It can help all races, all creeds. Let's think about. I look at it like this. You know, the smartest man in the world is Stephen Hawking, right? He passed. He passed recently. In the last 5 years or whatever it had. But when I look at his legacy of being the smartest man on the earth, he never knew nothing about cannabis because it was outlawed in his country where he lived at. So he never had a chance to study it. And he never had a chance to understand and realize that cannabis can help ALS. And he has ALS. So with him living in a country that was outlawed cannabis, we could have saved the smartest man in the world if he would have got a hold of cannabis. Mm-hmm. He would have been able to live to be 80, 100, or however, man. You know, look at Prince Phillips. This motherfucker is a child molester, all kind of weird shit he does, and he lived to be 99, 99 or however old he was, and they kept trying to keep him alive because they was doing heart transplants and heart murmurs and stuff and stuff like that. They was doing different stuff to keep him alive, but the natural way would have been to keep all these people alive is just let them understand what cannabis can do for them. Let them understand how the value of cannabis can do for them. Mm-hmm. And that's why I feel that it's not about color. It's just about the value of the plant. Okay. And plants don't see no color lines, you know? Mm. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, Tyrone, I see your mouth position.
Yeah. I would say plants don't see color lines, but people do, right? So when we don't, I'll say the word force a diverse perspective in this game, then when you don't force a diverse perspective in the United States of America, you boil down to whiteness. The lens becomes a white lens, as you can see in this industry. If we aren't going to force this diverse lens and perspective into this industry, then it's going to be a white-led industry once again. So then those folks that are creating the laws and those folks that are creating the rules are going to reflect rich white male values. And if this plant is for everybody, then everybody needs to be involved in the growing and the processing and the selling of the plant. And just the idea of if for nothing else, understanding that the plant deserves multiple perspectives at the table. But if we look at it from a social justice lens, we look at it from a lens that say, you've disenfranchised so many people because of this plant. And now we have an opportunity to give access to those folks who we disenfranchised. We need to go ahead and do that. So while the plant may not see the color, people do, and they continue to get rich off the backs of people that look like us. And if we're not intentional in saying, yo, we need to be at the table to make those decisions, then this industry is going to look just like all the other industries where people are making billions of dollars and folks like us sit on the sideline and watch it happen because they've found ways to just reflect and transfer their values to other areas of the world. So I think we have to demand that there's more diversity in this game, because if not, we're going to boil the plant down to a rich white male perspective that once again overlooks the black and brown folks in this country who continue to get the bottom of the barrel of things once it hits the market. So I'm all for diversifying this industry, because I do not want the folks in my neighborhood to continue to get the short end of the stick and not show their brilliance at the table where this plant is being talked about, discussed, and created.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tap in on that a little bit real quick. I 100% feel you, and I agree with you, but I also feel we do want to give everybody the opportunity to be able to make value out of this, but I could be honest with you. I've been in this industry for 20 years.
Yeah, you deserve a
and
seat.
I could kind of count on my hand, and maybe two hands, but I can count on my hands how many Black cultivators I know that are really good at what they do, and are making the value of the plant, like my Jewish friends, my white friends, my Mexican friends, and stuff like that. So it's like I want everybody to learn, but why not learn from some people who really know what they're doing, instead of trying to say, oh man, you're not Black, or you're not from this community, you're not from the where I'm from, so you don't know what you're talking about, or I don't want to get knowledge from you, because that's how some people look at it when we say that diversity of.
But that's what. But that's it. That's what those people that you're talking about, that you just named, that's what they're saying to people like me. We don't want your information. We don't want your expertise, and that's what I'm saying. Those people who think they know should be saying, yo, we want your expertise at our table, versus like you may see it as like a Black man saying, I don't want the white folks teaching me anything. No, I'm saying white folks should be saying, I need some of those Black and brown voices at our table, because if not, my perspective is limited. So I'm looking at it from that other perspective.
And I agree with that. And I agree with that. That's why I say, if we can get knowledge from certain people and don't get culture vultured, or the other word I use is predatory investors. If we don't have predatory investors or culture vultures, or if you have those guys, they go through the proper channels before they come directly to the person who they want to give the money to or give the knowledge to. You have to go through the proper channels of network. Like I'm creating a company called Legacy Agency, and Legacy Agency, it started from Clubhouse with Sherbinsky, but he's more of a geneticist, and I'm more of a actual business person that'll figure out how to make deals happen and stuff like that. So I created the Legacy Agency to be that middleman, or to be that conduit between people like these predatory investors, or these culture vultures. I'm not singling out and pushing them out, but I'm saying you got to come through the right people. We got to make sure you don't go after our people and take advantage of them and lead them down the wrong path, or maybe even worse, not giving them their worth or their value of what they bring to the industry. And I feel that more like me creating this agency, it's like CAA for cannabis. Anybody y'all know about CAA or William Morris? William Morris is an agency that actually deals with all the actors and all the studios and all the the directors, and when you want to go, when these big people want to go put a movie together, they go to CAA and they'll say, who you got in your roster? You got Will Smith, or you got what's the big director? You got Martin Scorsese, and you got you got whoever the big names is. You got these big names, and we want to put together the new Captain America 7 or whatever. So we're gonna go to CAA, and we're gonna go. I got $200 million to shoot this movie I want to do. I'm gonna go to CAA. Can you help me put this together? That's what CAA.
I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up so that I could get Dr. Vidal's insight on that question.
Real quick, yeah. Real quick, just how I'm saying is that you want to be able to spread that knowledge amongst the right people who want to learn that knowledge. I don't want to keep it away from people who want to learn it, but I do want to keep it. I want to protect both sides. I want to keep the predatory investors away from our people that really know what they're doing. I want to keep the people who don't know what they're doing, who's fucking up crops and saying they know what they're doing, away from the real investors, so we get the money to the right people to actually learn and do it right. So that's why I just wanted the insight on that. It's like, yeah, we definitely need diversity, but it needs to be kind of protected, kind of preserved. The diversity needs to be preserved. That's what I'm trying to get to. And that's the insights to making sure we are diverse and getting the right knowledge amongst everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Badeau, your perspective. Should the cannabis industry be diverse, and if so or not, why or why not?
Yes. As I've been listening to this discussion, one of the things, of course, my answer is always yes in the beginning, but I think after hearing this discussion, I can see Shaggy's perspective and the different perspectives. But one thing I want to note is thinking about it from a scientific perspective. Even the National Institute of Health, finally, not finally, but now there's funding mechanisms particularly put to the side to increase diversity. So for example, the very first funding opportunity I ever received to do research was a diversity supplement. So if it wasn't for the fact that I wasn't able to apply to a diversity supplement to conduct substance use research, I don't know if my I don't know, I don't want to talk bad about myself, but I don't know what would have happened. Would I still have been able to do that research if they didn't have that diversity lane for me? So the reason why I share that story or that example is because thinking about that in the cannabis industry, applying for grants, whether it's to conduct studies or to grow medicine, there's only a certain amount of applicants that are going to be funded. So if you don't have a way to kind of differentiate by some type of disparities, and in this case, we're using race and racial ethnic disparities as the example, then you have the opportunity for voices being drowned and the legacy market being taken advantage of, as Shaggy was mentioning.
Absolutely.
You're on mute, yeah.
It has to happen at least one time. I want to thank all of you for your time and attention. I use way more than an hour. It's like a whole 30 minutes out. I don't take lightly, one, that you dedicated a Saturday night for an hour with me. And then even after that dedication of that full hour, still gave me 30 additional minutes. So I appreciate that and do not in any way take that lightly. As we close out, I want to give everyone an opportunity to share. What are you up to? How can people follow, connect with you? People might want to know about the Cleveland School of Cannabis. They might want to know about cannabis and epidemiology. They may want to know about some of the things that Shaggy's doing at, I think it's Went Farms, but he's going to tell me what it is. You're muted right now. I'm going to come to you.
Went Farms is one of my companies. My company now is Shaggy Snacks.
Shaggy Snacks. There we go. All right. Shaggy, you know what? You could start us off since you already started. So where can people find you? What's your IG? All of the ways to stalk you socially in a respectable manner.
Stalk me. Please stalk me. You can follow me at shaggysnacks.canna. That's my brand page. My personal page is Shaggy_Brown420. That's my personal page. And I also have Went Farms. Went Farms is dedicated to the cultivation companies that I'm working on. I'm working on a cultivation company that I'm gonna start trying to raise money to actually get people get people involved on the cultivation side of things, so I can also give some knowledge to people who need it and give opportunities to people who need it from my perspective and from my agency's perspective. Went Farms is going to be under the agency, and then I'm also creating the agency, legacy agency, and I got an NFT out. I got a electric grinder out with Otto. The electric grinder I did with Otto, it grinds the weed, it mills the weed, and it combs the weed within 30 seconds. So you'll have your nice joint rolled in 30 seconds. I got that available on my page and on my website, shaggysnacks.shop is my website. So I'm just trying to create some things and give people opportunities to see other things than just, we can sell weed. It's other things we can do too. And like I tell people all the time, in this industry, let's compare it to the gold rush. The gold rush, the people who made the most money through the gold rush was the people who sold the picks and the shovels and the pans that was digging for gold, that was going for gold, not the gold miners. The gold miners, they made their money, but they was always coming back to the hardware store to get their picks and shovels and their pans. So I tell it from people like this. There's like Dr. Denise, like she's a doctor in it, and she's heavy into the cannabis industry. She's always in the right room. She speaks on it. So it's not just about smoking weed or selling weed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so many other lanes to make value for the cannabis industry, not just selling weed. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm really trying to create tech opportunities, other things, other ways for people to see that there's diversity in other eras of this, other genres of this cannabis industry, not just selling weed. So that's my take. I appreciate you for inviting me. Appreciate you for letting me come through and speak my talk. You know, this industry is very, 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 very special to me. It saved my life. It saved so many people I know around me life. And this is where I push for the medical part more than the recreational part, because I don't smoke blunts. I only smoke really OG Kush or some strong OG that's helping with my you know, sometimes I go through mental stress or mental problems or whatever. And you know, like I heard you guys talking earlier saying sativa and indica and this and that. Well, sativa actually makes me sleepy. It doesn't wake me up. I get more amped and excited and thinking more when I'm smoking some real good OG Kush. And it affects people differently. And I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and they was talking about how different blood types they finding weed to match different blood types and stuff like that. So I really want to be a part of the when they look at me 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. He was a pioneer to help push the culture the right way, not just to push the culture. You know, and that's where I stand on it.
Thank you. I love that. I love that Shaggy Snacks and all of the stuff that you're making to go with this Shaggy Snacks. I feel like you brought up so many good points that makes a perfect segue for Tyrone in terms of the amount of careers or jobs or all of the different avenues and tracks in this industry. And I'm sure quite a few of those are probably offered at Cleveland School of Cannabis. If you could tell us a little bit about how to follow, connect with you, and then also, if possible, the school. If folks are interested in enrolling or checking that school out, where do they go?
For sure. So I guess for me, just on Instagram, if you follow on the gram, it's Ty Russell 365. I don't do much. I'm on there every now and then. Ty Russell 365, and then LinkedIn, first name, last name, easy to find. Cleveland School of Cannabis is you can find us on Instagram as well, CSC Education. Or if you want to check the website out to enroll, it's csceducation.com. We also just launched a partnership with industry experts and folks in the industry, and it's called Cannabis Hub. And what it is really outward facing educational opportunities. So our school is a 150 hour to 300 clock hour school, which we're approved by a state, right? And we're applying to the Department of Education now for the United States to certify our education. So that we can say the United States recognizes us as an institution that's doing the work. So you look at major four-year institutions and they're all accredited regionally or nationally, and we're going for that sort of accreditation. But Cannabis Hub is an opportunity for people who may not want to go down that path, but want to ask questions like you. What's the difference between CBD and THC, right? Or what's CBD? Or how do I cook with cannabis? How do I measure out, you know, my dosing and stuff like that? So we have courses like that range from 1 to 2 hours that you can take that are self-paced if you don't want to dig as deep into the industry to get a job, you know, and go to our school. So you can check that out at cannahubedu.com. That's CANNAHUBEDU.com. You can get on there and start checking out some courses right away. And then the other thing that we're creating is actually, I won't even share that now. I'll just tell you, we're really looking to mobilize around the educational aspect of the cannabis plant. So we'll be reaching out to some institutions to do that work. But education builds nations, and that's the work that we do as an organization. So we appreciate it.
I know that's right. Education builds nations. You better put in that tagline.
That's what it is.
I'm here for it. Dr. Vido, how can we follow, find you, and connect with you beyond this space?
Yes, you can follow me at Dr. Vido at Instagram. On Instagram, I'm dr.vidot. That's probably the best place to follow me to see what I'm up to, because I share a lot of things with my studies. My lab has its own IG as well, the Vido Cannabis Lab, VIDOT Cannabis Lab. Also, if you're on Clubhouse, I talk a lot in different rooms there. I enjoy being around cannabis space there. So you can follow me at the Cannabis Doc on Clubhouse. But yeah, and also if you happen to be in South Florida and watching this, I'm getting ready to launch a new study, the first NIH study funded to conduct a cohort from 18 to 30-year-olds that consume cannabis. And I want to follow them their whole life. That's my goal. I'm only funded for 4 years right now. But either way, if you're interested, herbalheartstudy.com, and you can find out more information about it.
Do y'all supply the cannabis for those 4 years?
Not this time.
No.
The next study I write. Not, you know, you gotta,
I don't fit the
step at a time.
demographic anyway. I'm not under 30. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you all again so much for participating, being here. If you're watching live, thank you so much. Please feel free to share, follow, like, subscribe, do all those things. It makes me feel good about myself when you do that. And I appreciate it. This has been the Counter Narrative Show, and we have been exploring the lack of diversity in the cannabis industry. I could talk, I got words. In the cannabis industry. Good night.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.